Hello everyone. Our group decided to focus on the topic of substance abuse in the LGBTQ plus community. Our group members are myself, Gardenia Cuadra Cuellar, Stephanie Palacios, Lizette Jimenez, and Eric Fletes. The next person to speak is going to be Stephanie, and she is going to give us a background and as to why it is important to address this issue.
Hi everyone. The LGBTQ plus community is twice as likely to develop substance use disorder in comparison to the heterosexuals. This is due to many different social factors. Unfortunately, many members of the LGBTQ plus are unable to live up to their true selves and remain in the closet for an extended period of time. In doing so, they recruit to drugs and alcohol to cope with the reality. They also deal with a lot of discrimination and homophobia, not only from society, but those who are supposed to be their biggest supportive system, like family member, friends, co-workers, etc. Due to this hatred coming from all angles, people in the community and people in the LGBTQ plus community tend to develop internalized homophobia. Internalized homophobia is being unable to feel comfortable in your own skin due to the anti-gay stigmas. This population feels the only way to silence those negative thoughts and feelings is to recruit through drugs and alcohol. The LGBTQ plus community also suffers from depression, stress, anxiety, and HIV and AIDS. This also interferes and slows the process of seeking help for substance abuse. Also, there aren't many LGBTQ plus treatment facilities designed for this specific community needs. And those who seek help in traditional treatment facilities have to face with judgment and homophobia from fellow patients and counselors. Children in the LGBTQ plus community are also at high risk of dropping out of school and developing substance use disorders than straight children due to harassment and hostile environment in their schools. The daily bullying, harassment, and homophobic remarks deprive students of the ability to learn effectively, which only drives them to miss school or drop out. Also, having authority figures like teachers, counselors, school administrators be anti-LGBT plus and have their own biases can make these students feel unsafe and unsupported, leading them to drop out of school and fall into substance abuse. The LGBT plus community revolves around bars and clubs because this is where they feel a sense of belonging. Bars and clubs are places known as safe places. These places provide a sense of safetyness. This is where they feel the most understood, and there is no need to live a double life, but instead be their true selves. However, these safe spaces are also where the most temptation to alcohol and drugs and sex exists. And someone in the LGBT plus community who is addicted or a recovering addict, these safe places can be harmful.
In addition, in order to wrap up our statement of our problem, we also wanted to include the risk factors that contribute to the development of SUD in LGBTQ plus individuals. So we found that there was 2.5 higher rates that LGBTQ plus use mental health services more than their heterosexual counterparts. Discrimination against LGBTQ plus people have been associated with higher rates of psychiatric and psychological disorders and suicide. LGBTQ plus teens are 6 times more likely to experience symptoms of depression than non-LGBTQ plus identifying teens. And lastly, LGBTQ plus youth are more than twice as likely to feel suicidal and over 4 times as likely to attempt suicide compared to heterosexual youth. So again, to reiterate, these are risk factors. Also internalized homophobia is also a risk factor, as that contribute to the development of SUD within the LGBTQ plus community.
So I'd like to talk to you about P&P, or partner play. Party and play is a subculture of the LGBT community. PNP, also known as chemsex, is the act of engaging in sexual activity while under the influence of substances. Some of the more popular drug choices for PNP would be methamphetamine, which is crystal meth, gamma hydroxyburate, which is GBHB, and ketamine, also known as special K. Um, PNP is actually one of the leading causes for the newly diagnosed HIV case in the United States. Gay and bisexual men that engage in PNP can do so by having multiple partners in a short time frame, or engage in group sex. Because of the properties of the substances, it causes its users to have lower inhibition, meaning they do things they normally wouldn't do. In this case, engaging in high-risk sexual behavior without protection, or barebacking. Because of this, PNP has been linked to the uprise of sexually transmitted diseases, hepatitis, as well as HIV and AIDS. Gay and bisexual men actually become physically dependent on the drug, meaning that they're unable to perform any sexual acts without it. PNP can also cause intimacy issues as well as unhealthy coping behavior. During my interview with a bisexual man that has been sober for 8 years, has stressed how hard it is to find a genuine relationship within the LGBT community. Because most of its men primarily engage in PNP or are just looking for sex, there is no room for intimacy.
Hello, my name is Lisa Jimenez, and I will be covering the area of resiliency within the LGBTQ community. So, GSA groups are groups to empower and educate schools and communities. They help the youth become advocates to protect the LGBT community from harassment and violence. So GSA groups are created in order for members of the LGBTQ community to come together and spend time talking about important topics and also advocating for themselves and each other. So why are GSA groups important for schools? So there has been research shown that students within the LGBTQ community have a rough time at school based on their identities, and having these groups within the schools have helped them boost their self-esteem. They are more, it helps other students be aware as well. And the GSA groups just create a safe place for students in the LGBTQ community to come together to promote an exclusive school, but it also promotes respect and appreciation for our differences as a community, not just for the LGBTQ community. So originally the GCA program was named Gay and Straight Alliance about 30 years ago, and then was changed to Gender and Sexuality Alliance. So this program has made a great impact in schools. It has shown great change within students of the LGBTQ community. It has made schools make it feel like a safer place for students. It's a program where students are able to go and participate and be part of a group where they feel understanding and they get to learn more about themselves. And this program has also impacted students, not just from the LGBTQ, but all students in school. And this is because it has made them more aware and engaged with the LGBTQ community. It has helped reduce discrimination against the LGBTQ students. There has been research that having the GCA programs within these schools have decreased levels of bullying of students for either their weight, gender, religion, disability, and or sexuality. These programs have helped students boost their confidence, making them succeed in school, and making it for schools to have higher rates of graduates due to these programs. Unlike other schools who do not have these programs, many students who fall into the LGBTQ community are more have a lower self-esteem. There's a higher risk of suicide. Unlike these programs help them feel like they're part of the school and know they're not alone, and it just helps their self-esteem. Okay, now we are going to talk about the AA, NA, and CMA. So these are just services dedicated to LGBTQ members. An example of this would be the Gay and Sober program. So the Gay and Sober program's mission is just to make it a safe and fun community for those who are sober as well as for those who are beginning their journey, allowing them to see they can still be happy and have fun being sober. So during the whole COVID pandemic, it was hard to have communication with them in person, but there were online meetings where it helped the members feel like they were being heard and knowing they were not alone during this journey, whether they have just started or are still on that journey. And then there is also, with the whole Pride celebration, there was also made sober spaces, which was just areas that were made where alcohol was not allowed for these members. And then there's also other places such as like restaurants or cafes that support these programs, and they have made certain spaces in these areas, which they also call it sober spaces, and it's a great way for the LGBTQ community and members of these programs to still have fun and be sober at the same time. So a lot of LGBTQ individuals do experience more health disparities compared to others. Young adults do have a higher level of depression, suicide attempts, and substance abuse due to families sometimes not accepting who they are. And a key to make these changes is encouraging families to change behaviors towards their LGBTQ children and not rejecting them, and instead being engaged and supportive. This way, it can help families to decrease risk and promote healthier outcomes for LGBTQ children and young adults.
Okay, so call to action. What can we do in order to lower the statistics of SUD in the LGBTQ plus community? So our group came out with two different formats on ways to address this problem. The first format is through policy, and the other format is actual tangible ways in which social workers could advocate for this issue. So before I get into the policy, I want to quickly talk about hate crimes and the statistics regarding hate crimes. So, according to Duncan et al., neighborhoods with a higher incidences of LGBTQ-related hate crimes have a higher prevalence of LGBTQ youth dependence on marijuana and other illicit drugs. And this is important because if there's an association with hate crimes and substance abuse in LGBTQ plus communities, then we should also address the issue of hate crimes. So according to the FBI, in 2019, there was 8,812 victims of reported hate crimes. I'm going to skip. Well, 57.6% of those were targeted because of the offender's bias against race, ethnicity, or ancestry, and 16.7 of those were targeted because of the bias against their sexual orientation. And if you look more in specific areas or of identities, 61.8% were victims of crime motivated by offenders' anti-gay male bias. 25 was the bias regarding anti-lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender, and 10.0% were victims of anti-lesbian bias. And this is important because so we're looking here at number 2. We thought that we should amend the current federal law, which is the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act that was enacted in 2009, to become more rigid with charges regarding hate crimes and allocating funds for the training of first responders and law enforcement with the skills with handling sexual orientation, bias, hate crimes, including intersectionalities. So currently it's not really enforced, this law. They recently did fund it for so that they could track hate crimes, but currently it's still really much just viewed as a misdemeanor, and we would like for that policy to be amended so that it becomes a felony, in hopes that if it's a felony, then there will be less hate crimes targeting LGBTQ plus communities. Secondly, as far as our policy, we also would like a policy that is for gay straight alliances, which are called GSA clubs or programs, to become mandatory for all middle school or high schools nationwide. The reason being is because there is strong evidence on how positively these programs impact the LGBTQ youth communities. So here I got a quote from McCormick et al. GSA groups have a significant impact on the youth's self-identity and self-esteem, which are critical for growing their peer and family support systems. So they have been researched. There has been a longitudinal research regarding GSAs in school, and they have came up that there is a positive outcome in the youth. So when there's these programs in schools, children or youth of the LGBTQ plus community feel more safe in self-identifying or self-disclosing that they are part of this community. There is more social support, more of a normalcy. It normalizes who they are in terms of their identity, and it makes even their supports at home and their family supports to become more like easier and safer, and overall they have greater academic achievement and self-esteem, and that's what we would want, because as my previous teammates have stated, that mental health is a huge reason why, along with the biases that people have and the stigma as to why LGBTQ plus individuals do fall into the trap of SUD, unfortunately. So we have hopes that these programs would also help LGBTQ plus communities. Lastly, we did want to add a little creativity as far as solutions. So we came up with 2 different solutions that are tangible actions that social workers can partake in. So the first one we came up with, as my teammate Eric has spoken about, how gay dating apps have severely impacted, and they're very popular in the LGBTQ plus community. So since they are very popular, they're being constantly used, and we live in the digital era of social media, we wanted to utilize those as tools. So number 1 is that we want gay dating apps to provide ads for nonprofit organizations that provide counseling for substance abuse disorders and or 12-step programs. So instead, as my partner has spoken about those that language that is used in gay dating apps, we thought, well, hey, it would be a good idea if we promote, or if we do a partnership with nonprofit organizations that offer support specifically for specialized treatments, or not treatments, but just treatments for the nonprofit organizations. But we want those ads to also pop up in gay dating apps, instead of just drug ads. Also, the second solution we came up with was utilizing social media platforms that promote nonprofit organizations that create safe spaces, healing circles for LGBTQ individuals and LGBT plus people of color and other intersectionalities. This will be really important because, as we know, again, social media is really popular, and if we organize with nonprofit organizations, or us ourselves organize with someone who is an LCSW, to create such a platform would be very beneficial in addressing mental health and the overall well-being, and establishing social support systems within our own local communities. And to that, I would like to end that the reason why we think that these would be very beneficial is because, according to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, current research suggests that treatment should address unique factors in these patients' lives that may include homophobia, transphobia, family problems, violence, stigma, and social isolation. And has been proven that social support therapy, along with cognitive behavioral therapy, are the best treatments in order to address substance abuse in the LGBTQ plus communities. And lastly, if I could move on, here are our references. Thank you.